everybody, this is Jackie here again with the Sexy Politico, and we have a return guest here, Dr. Almost. Are you Dr. Sara Long yet, or are you
Not yet.
almost
In
close?
progress. Yeah.
Yes, who also known as the makeup historian, and we're here to talk about a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts: postgraduate studies. Now, we're talking about somebody who's looking to go into a graduate program more than somebody who is looking to go into a medical or who is looking to go into law school. So maybe at some point I'll find somebody who knows more about those topics, but we are specifically talking about graduate programs. So when a person is considering doing postgraduate work, what are some things that he or she should be looking into or thinking about?
Well, I think the number one thing to really take some time to think about is, do you really need it? Really think about the end game here. What is the ultimate goal? What is your career that you would like to pursue? What type of level, things like that. Really think about the end goal. And if pursuing that degree is not something that you need, it's okay. You don't have to do it just for your own ego. I mean, I know lots of academics, we love to just keep piling up those degrees, but you really have to think about the end goal. And if it's not necessary, you don't, you may save yourself quite a bit of time and resources and stress, but on the flip side of that, if it is something that you do need, then you need to start getting strategic and kind of hit the ground running from day one before you're even accepted into those programs. Begin your networking, begin talking to people and telling them that it's something you're thinking about. But I highly recommend taking some time in between degrees, because when I jumped from, I didn't take any time. When I went from my bachelor's to my master's, I went straight into it. And in retrospect, that wasn't a good idea. But then I took a few years between my master's and my working on my doctorate now, and that made the world of a difference. So I would really just say to take time to truly think about the end goal.
Yeah, for my husband, for example, has his undergraduate degree in linguistics, and he's a speech language pathologist. And you need a master's degree to be a speech language pathologist. His his mother wants him to get his doctorate. He has no need for a doctorate. She just wants to
Mm.
say that she has a son who is a doctor. But he's like, I
Yeah.
don't want to spend the money. Mm.
Yeah, it's a lot. It can be a lot of money. So you do have to think about that, especially if you have to take out loans. Like I didn't have to take out loans for all of the other degrees, but for my doctorate, I have had to take out loans. So it can be a huge financial burden. And it has to be a calculated kind of strategic risk that you are very aware of. Don't just take those loans just because, like, really have something that you want to achieve with it. So
Absolutely. Especially since they're not subsidized at all by the federal government.
yeah, yeah, it's an interesting, topic. That's a whole other topic in itself too.
Well, we might get into that. So what is the process of post of going of getting a master's degree? Like, you're finished your third year of your undergraduate, what should you be doing or thinking about?
Well, in retrospect, or looking back on it, I made a lot of mistakes. So I'm glad that you asked me that question, because if I could go back and do it again, I'd handle it in a completely different way. When I didn't get the idea to, oh, I want a master's until my last semester of my bachelor's. So, and I really wasn't in the best spot. I didn't have the strongest application, because I just wasn't thinking about it and until the last minute, and that really wasn't good. But thankfully, I had experience in business and negotiating and things like that, so I knew how to go to bat for myself. But if I could go back, I would say to start thinking of your entire, like, earning your bachelor's in its entirety as one giant interview. especially if you decide to stay at the same school for your master's, if you're not gonna, and sometimes that can actually work to your advantage. But to think about the whole experience as if your interview, quote unquote, and your application was beginning on day one. So get involved in organizations, think about publications, think about the projects you really want to achieve. And it sounds kind of funny, but think about how you're gonna market yourself, not in the sense of, like, the way that you think, the unique like, your individuality, what you're gonna bring to that program, and, how is it really the right fit? Be able to explain that as well. So, I think that if I could go back, I would've used my entire bachelor's experience to, get better at networking and build that resume from day one.
I would my s- I took the GRE the beginning of my senior year of college, and like I had this idea of going to graduate school because what are you going to do with a history degree if you don't want to teach? And so,
Well,
but
yeah.
at that point in my life, at what would I have been, 21, 22, something along those lines, I was like throwing darts in the air, and I took the GRE and the LSAT in the same month, and that is really stupid.
Oh, that sounds like a lot. How did you
I
survive
was
that?
stupid. Don't do that. That number one, don't do that. Don't do that. The night before I took the LSAT, my then boyfriend came over, made me a big dinner because he was like, "Oh, you're gonna have a big test tomorrow. Here's a big dinner," and then threw up the entire night in my toilet.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
got no sleep.
Oh, no. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
I think the only school I got into was like Appalachia University, and I didn't even apply there.
Oh,
Like, I was just I'm like, "Okay, what am I gonna okay."
yeah.
Yeah. It
It's
wasn't smart, but also I didn't have a plan. I just was like, I'm taking random courses just because I like them and they fit into the graduation requirements for my school. And then my senior year, my counselor was like, "You do realize you're one class away from a minor in Southeast Asian studies. You're one class away from a double major in history and political science." And I didn't plan this.
mm,
It's like,
yeah.
this is a map that should have been planned out and should have been thought about so that when I did apply for graduate schools, even though I didn't do well on the GRE, that maybe somebody would have been like, "Yeah, but maybe she's just not good at standardized tests." Because some people aren't.
Yeah, and well, that's a topic too, the GRE. I have opinions about that.
I do too, but also
Yeah.
don't take the LSAT and the GRE in the same month. Don't do that.
Right. Well, I can connect with you a lot in the sense of, like, looking back on it, I wish I would have had a more strategic plan in the beginning and, yeah, really been focusing on that end goal and, like, what do I really wanna what am I doing here? Like, what have how do I wanna use this degree? But I will say I was good at talking to people. Like, when I saw someone who had a job that I was like, "Oh, maybe that's something I'd wanna do," I was very good at, just kind of in the sense, like, bugging them, like, "Hey, can I shadow you?" or "Can I do an internship?" And, um, so I was better at that before I was at my kind of overall plan, so I can connect with that part a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked the researching, I liked the reading, I liked the studying, but I didn't it was I couldn't answer the question, "What are you gonna do with this degree?"
And that's such a good I love that you brought up that question because I remember when I was in grad school, that was something our department talked about a lot, that collectively looking at history graduate programs throughout the country, something we were not challenging our students to do was to think about the marketability. What will you really do with this degree? It was always, kind of focused on the grades and um, associations, and how many lines are on your CV and publications, but not
Mhm.
all of the different ways that you could market. Expect like for me in particular, a history degree, right? And there's so many ways that you can market that. You are not just confined to teaching alone. It's actually one of the most marketable degrees out there. And I wish we wouldn't tell, and again, this is in particular regard to history students, I wish we wouldn't tell them that you're not gonna have a very lucrative career with a history degree. I think that's so um it's not true. Let's start with that. There's lots of ways that you can market it. And then it also discourages people from pursuing the things that maybe is their calling. Maybe that was the thing that they were really supposed to do. And like your how much you make in your career, that's on you. So don't
Hmm.
listen to people telling you like, oh, you're not going to have this with that degree. It's what you do with the degree as an individual that changes everything.
I
So,
never learned until I was in my 30s. Nobody ever talked to me about the idea of the soft skills that you learn with
yeah.
your degree, like, or with other jobs that might sound like writing on your CV that you worked at McDonald's, for instance. Like, you think that that sounds low or degrading, and when I worked in politics, they're like, no, what that says to me is that you know how to talk to people.
Mhm. Yeah, the
You
communication
have a
skills.
history degree. That means that you have no problem sitting in front of a big old stack of books, reading and doing research.
Mhm. Yeah, and being able to convey, I
You
tell my
have
own s
writing, things like that
yes.
too.
Yeah, I tell my students that as well. Never underestimate the power of being able to write well, to articulate yourself well, public speaking, and even I really think that the classroom should be more of an environment where you can test things out and, in a sense, fail epically. So it's like, if I could go back and look or redo my bachelor's and my master's as well, I would have had that I would have employed that mentality, like, I'm just gonna test out stuff and figure it out along the way, because you don't wanna be working on developing those soft skills after you graduate.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
when you should already have them mastered. So,
That's why I almost feel like there is that stunted 20s that this generation has, is because we we are we are given all these skills, but we don't know what to do with them. We have all of
yeah.
these opportunities. It's like going overseas, traveling, getting degrees, and you don't know what to do with it. And so it takes you almost 10 years to figure out what to do with it. And so you're not really getting anywhere until you're in your 30s when it comes to your career. Because then finally you're like, oh, I know how to research and speak well on different subjects. Now I
Mhm.
just have to give myself authority on that.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I always encourage people around me to do that, like to learn how to advocate for yourself, and it's because of my own experience. I didn't do that until much later in the academic game. I was very timid in the beginning of it, and I wasn't applying, which was so weird because I was a makeup artist at the same time. So I'm in business. And when I was in a business setting, I was like this ruthless businesswoman who was good
Hmm.
at marketing and negotiating. And then I would get into academia and I'd be like, a little bit more timid, and I wish I would have kind of blended that, into both aspects of my life, at that time, because you do have to learn how to advocate for yourself. No one's gonna hand you that dream job or that research project that you want on a silver platter. You have to be brave enough and believe in yourself enough to create the opportunity, and I think a lot of students today, even I kid you not, like, after I graduated with my master's, there were I hate to say it, but I'm gonna be real. There were lots of students who were kind of like, "Well, where's my full-time job? Where's my full-time teaching position and my benefits?" And I'm like, No, 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 no. The game just started. Like, the getting your master's, that was the warm-up lap. And then when you if you decide to stay in teaching, now it gets
Hmm.
more competitive."
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have friends who are playing the oh god, what is it? The assistant professor, like provost, like the like they have part-time jobs at like five different schools. And they live in Illinois. There's a whole bunch of universities up in Chicago, and they go to different schools like 3 to 4 different times a week, and all together that comes up with a full-time income.
Yeah, and that's a whole other thing too. I wish more people knew about it. And when I was in graduate school, I wish my professors would have been honest with me about the ugly side of the adjunct chapter.
Adjunct, that's the word I was looking for in my.
Yeah, it's ruthless, it's competitive, and it's very difficult to land that full-time position. And there's you know, no one really academics don't like to talk about it, but in actuality, really throughout most colleges throughout the nation, adjunct professors are carrying about 90%. If you know, that's an approximate number, but
At least
still.
more than 75%.
But yeah, they take on so much of the workload, and they're kind of stuck on their own little island, and it's very difficult, and sometimes, we're not open and transparent about that. It's just constant pressure of, "Get that full-time teaching position, try to get tenure," but no one is, you know, really honest and open about, like, how do we help you through that, and just how challenging it can be sometimes. And you know, I that's part of the reason why I don't hold back in talking about it, because I wish someone would have told me that before I started, you know, and I'm still an adjunct professor. So doing that same thing, hopping around from different schools, and it can be challenging. And well, for me, the pandemic really made things even 10 times more complicated, but
God, I really, I can only imagine. I really can. I mean, I've heard bitching from a friend of mine whose husband does that, but I don't know what it really is like.
It's it's interesting, and
Yeah.
I'll stay you know, professional for now, but there are quite a few books. I think one's called like the oh gosh, what was it called? Like the adjunct something something class. Like I can't remember exactly what the title of it was, but it explained it perfectly. I'm gonna look it up. And we can put it in the episode notes
Yeah,
because
definitely.
it was great. It really, if you want to, it's like, if you want the honest truth about what it's like to be an adjunct professor, I'll send you the book. This one pretty much just is a no BS approach to it.
And we need to make it clear, an adjunct professor is different from a TA. A
Yeah.
TA, they're very different roles and very different positions. Could you explain the difference just so that people don't get confused?
Well, if I understand correctly, because like Claremont right now, I don't see a lot of TAs, and I remember seeing some of them at Cal State Fullerton, but I'm pretty, you know, that's a teaching assistant. So like, and I think in some doctoral programs, it's a requirement sometimes that you have to serve and like kind of do a certain amount of time as a TA. So you're teaching, but you're not on the trajectory towards the different levels of being a professor. So you're not you're it's I think it's almost worse to be a TA because you're doing all, you know,
You're
a
doing
lot of
all
the
the
same
work
work.
with no
Yeah.
reward.
And you're not even on the path towards, well, depending, it goes back to how do you market your skills, you know, but most of them, it's like you haven't really kind of made that jump over to having the professor title just yet. And you need that because there's levels to being a professor. You have to work your way up in that regard too. So I've never been a TA, so I can't speak to
My
the
my
exact
my
nuances.
brother is finishing up his undergraduate degree in computer engineering, and his 100 level classes were basically taught by TAs. I wonder if TAs are more common in the math and sciences
Oh, I
realm,
don't
but
okay.
my personal experience with TAs is that they basically taught 100 level courses and did most of the grading for 100 level courses. So
Yeah.
I had a TA for I had a TA for English 103, for instance, and a TA for Math 101, my one and only math course I had to take.
Mhm.
But my
Oh.
brother had a lot of TAs, and they made him feel very old because he left school after 2 years and went back, and he's nearly 30, and he's like, my TAs are younger than me.
Mhm. You said something about the grading aspect too, and I do remember that from Cal State Fullerton. The TAs that I knew there, they complained quite a bit about the grading and, which, now as an adjunct, I mean, I really get that. Grading is it takes up a lot of your time, even if you do multi my issue though with, and this is like a tangent with grading, is I'm very anti multiple choice test.
Oh God.
I don't like them, which is like it honestly, if I did multiple choice test, it would make grading a million times easier, but it just goes against my entire ethos as a teacher, like my philosophy as a teacher. So I do create more work for myself sometimes in that regard, but it's always because I'm focused on the student, like, and retention, not just all of these good grades, if you will, or trying to, like, the anxiety of trying to get a good grade on a test. I'm more focused on, do you actually know what we're talking about?
You sound like a professor that I had where he wanted me to compare 1500s something with 1600s something, and I compared 1600s to 1500s, and he's like, "You didn't do what I asked, but you did it very well. So I'm going to give you a B."
Yeah.
And
Well,
he's like, "I actually he's like I he's like, "You did it backwards."
and
And I'm like, "Isn't it the same thing?"
well, I think that's what, and that's what, because we both have backgrounds in history, that's something we're good at, is putting things into context. And, but I think sometimes history students get a little frustrated or feel lost when most of our education system is incredibly linear and like all of the
Mhm.
standardized tests, right? It's always about just memorizing the dates and everything's very linear. But like, for instance, I could totally do a test where I ask my students, like, if we're talking about like Reconstruction era,
Yeah.
right? When is the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment? When are those ratified? That could totally be a question
Yeah.
on an exam and it would be fine. But going back to, like, this is why I don't like them. If I ask my students, what's the difference between the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment? Then it's like, now we really have to know that historical context and some legal history there as well as political history. So, do I challenge my students? Yes, but it's because I had lots of professors who challenged me too. And I think it's beneficial in the long run, because you just get stronger as a scholar. Like, I don't want to create more students. I want to create scholars. And part of that is you have to remain a student yourself, if you will. And so I also tell my students, like, I'm never gonna throw you into something that I haven't done before. I'm not cruel like that. So if I'm challenging you on something, it's because I've, in a sense, had my ass handed to me before, and I'm trying to protect you from having that same experience.
Yeah. I only ever had one history class that just threw me under the bus, and
Oh, no.
that was a 400 level Indian history class that was about like prehistory. That was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in the warmest room of the entire building. So I
Oh,
just kept falling asleep.
that's
I
so funny.
just kept the this professor had this droning tone
Oh,
talking
no.
about rocks,
Yeah.
and like it wasn't any it wasn't even it was like 10,000 BC. I'm just sitting here going, shouldn't this be an anthropology class?
Mm,
And I'm
yeah.
just
That's tough when it's
I
the
was
perfect, like, nap
the
conditions.
it was I kept falling asleep.
That's so funny.
That
Yeah.
was that was the only time I ever got a D in a history class, was because I just could not stay awake in it. And I did not even I'm like, I'm not gonna retake this. I'm just gonna let that D live.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes, that's a good point too, is like, I think I see it a lot more today with like Gen Z, if you will, a lot of students get very high anxiety about grades, right? And if they don't have the A, they oh my gosh, they're like they put their self-worth connected to their GPA. And I'm like, life is messy. It's complicated sometimes. And every so often you're thrown a curveball. And if you get a bad grade, don't let it like slow down the momentum. Don't let it impact you or fuel that anxiety so much. Like, you just got to get a little gritty with it. Like, yeah, like how you did, you owned it. This is what happened. But it's what happened and you kept going.
I'm yep, I'm not going to be an ancient prehistory Indian scholar. Nope.
If it's not your thing, then
It's not meant to be.
yeah, you got to pick and choose your battles.
Exactly. But that's so do you think though, when somebody is looking into their future, should they stay at the same institution that they did their undergraduate at? Do you think that that's the best choice for most people, or should they look really hard into leaving and going to other schools?
I think it really depends on the person, your resources, and what you want to do with a graduate degree, right? Um, for those who do, I think the deterrent for a lot of people of like staying with the same school is I remember some of my friends would get very nervous if I don't have diversity of different schools on my CV, I'm going to get dinged for that when I'm interviewing for a teaching position or something. And now I can share that that's absolutely not true. What hiring committees are really focused on is, did you get a degree? Because they're, looking at your work ethic and your research. So you won't get dinged really for that. I think that's kind of a myth within academia, for most schools really. But then again, it's kind of going back to, if you know what you want to do, if you're, for instance, like let's say you wanted to focus more on public history, things to do with museums. If the graduate program has a good history degree, but it doesn't have any classes or any type of, or any professors who have any real research in public history, that's not a good move for you. So you do have to think about it. And if it's necessary, you got to go to the school where they have the resources, they have the mentors that you're going to need for your specific project, for your niche. Um, so it really just comes down to, what's the end goal here? And if you are lucky enough to stay because you've already built a lot of those professional connections, that's great. But if not, don't be nervous about that either. You got to get a little selfish with your educational career. And I know that sounds bad, but you got to get gritty. You got to go to bat for yourself, and you're investing all of this time, these resources. So go to the place where you're gonna be in the best environment to thrive. So I don't want people to stress and think that they're gonna like really get hurt or dinged for staying at the same school, because that's not what it doesn't really matter.
For something like history, people don't realize that history in and of itself is a broad, is not, most people niche down a lot once they have history degrees and in their master's and doctorate studies. Anybody who goes past a 200 level history class where they get past, American history, they realize that there's the women's historian, there's the Southeast Asian historians, there's Southeast Asian historians, there's Asian historians, there's South Asian historians, there's East Asian historians. And then there are people who are, I'm an East Asian historian who focuses on war or women, or most people have that niche of a specialty. And if you do want to niche down that much, you do need to find the right school for yourself.
Exactly. Like the whole one of the main reasons I stayed at Cal State Fullerton was because we do have a phenomenal public history program, and that was something I really wanted to focus on. I wanted to actually go more into conservation. But the closest thing I had to me with the resources I had available was more so public history in the broad sense. So that was why it worked out. It made sense. But you're absolutely right. You really have to think about, what do you want to specialize in? What's the focus? And what school, what program is going to have what I need? And that's true for every field. You got to think about the specialization.
I went to Northern Illinois University, which has a very strong program in Southeast Asian studies, but I didn't go there with that intention. I was more surprised by it. I ended up being friends with a lot of anthropology students, so I took those history classes with them. And I'm like, and so I accidentally stumbled into a Southeast Asian minor and ended up doing my senior thesis on a topic dealing with Southeast Asian history. But in reality, I should have done more research before going to a school to find out what they actually specialize in. What professors are you going to have there to help you with your future? Because you're right, your undergraduate degree should be, you should see your undergraduate time is less about partying but also figuring out what's the next step going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was night and day. Like I wasn't the best at thinking about that for my bachelor's or master's, but I learned that lesson on how important it was. And in those few years after, like, the gap between my master's and doctorate, I was a totally different approach. I researched, I talked to people, I in depth research about these programs, and really took my time with it. And I think it made the world of a difference because now I'm in a doctorate program where I have more freedom with my research and I'm around the people that I need to be around to achieve what I want to do. Like, the culture's right. So it may be a lot of work, but it won't be in vain. It'll be very helpful to you.
And also don't be afraid to talk to professors. Professors aren't the boogeymen or women.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
I
very
was
good
so
advice.
scared I was so scared as an undergraduate student to go to office hours when in reality, even if you don't need help, you should go to office hours anyway, just so that people know your face and know your name and you can talk to, just go there with a question. Because when you're a senior and you're looking for recommendations, you know you're a professor that saw you once 3 years ago is not going to give you a recommendation, and you have to pray that those professors you had your senior year will want to give you recommendation letters.
It's yeah, that there's a chance. I mean, if you're quiet, if you're timid, they may not remember you.
Mm.
That's kind of that's unfortunate when if you decide down the road like, "Uh-oh, now I want to go into these programs or a job and I need letters of recommendation." That's why, like, if you approach no matter what degree it is, your entire academic career, if you're thinking about the whole thing as an interview, that's why it's going to help you. And that's such a good piece of advice. Yeah, go to those office hours, make that connection, and it's very helpful. It is, if your professor knows who you are. And sometimes even with my own students, I forget how nerve-wracking it can be, like because of one when they eventually have the courage to come to an office hour meeting, sometimes they'll say that I was really nervous, I was nervous to talk to you. And for adjuncts listenings, we have to be more mindful of that. Sometimes we forget because we're so busy that it can be very nerve-wracking to our students. And I think we have to be more compassionate and, like, encourage them that this is something you want to do and to be thinking about, because teaching at the college level, you're not just a teacher, you're a mentor and you're a facilitator. So you're teaching adults. And really part of it, you do have to kind of, yeah, be that person that encourages them to to think about stuff like that.
And also think about yourself as an adult when you're 18, because
Yeah.
you are an adult.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you are an adult and you need to start thinking of yourself as an adult, and that your university time is training for your future.
Yeah.
I
And I
wish I
think
had thought that way.
and I think the pandemic kind of made things in that regard worse because now we have college freshmen coming in who really the last time that they were in a class in person, maybe it was like their sophomore year of high school. So it's been a learning curve in that regard too. Sometimes students will come up and I don't know that it's their first semester of college ever, but they kind of approach you as if you're going to act like their high school teacher and, remind them about stuff. And it's like, I hate to break it to you, but I'm your professor. I'm not your mom. I'm not going to be.
Syllabus.
Exactly. The
I told
syllabus
you.
is there. Day 1, you get the
Mm.
syllabus and, you're an adult. I tell my own students quite a bit that I will move heaven and earth to get them the resources that they need, but I can't read their mind. You have to communicate to me that something's going on if you're not understanding something, and then I can help you. It's like that. I'm a teacher. I want to help you. I want to help you achieve the most that you can. And even I also tell them too that, you really shouldn't be like living my experiences on repeat. I want you to take all of my achievements, my failures, and go a million miles farther than I ever could because it's like, well, it's not like I got into teaching for the money, I have to get money from other projects or it's good, but still, it's like, I'm here because and I teach because I really care about my students, but I'm not gonna tolerate nonsense.
Right. I get it.
So,
Is there any advice that you would give to somebody who is a woman, a person of color, any sort of minority may differ from may differ from anybody else?
yeah, and I liked that you sent me this question, and I took, a little time to think about it, but something that I have noticed is that there is, a part of the academic culture right now that really kind of fuels like a victim mindset, especially amongst women. And I want this is expect for everyone, but especially for the ladies. If you've worked that hard to get into those programs, don't give in to that. You need to have an empowered mindset. Don't give in to that victim mindset with your research, with how you talk to people or how you view yourself. You worked really hard to get there, and you need to empower not only yourself and have that mindset, but empower others around you. And yeah, just remember to it's not a matter of like if I'll get to the place that I want to be. Start thinking about when you will get to the place that you want to be. Start telling yourself that you will. And when you get to the top, remember to pay things forward, to open that door for the people who were just a few years ago. But again, it always goes back to that kind of have an empowered mindset and don't listen to the rhetoric sometimes that tries to convince women that they're not capable of achieving phenomenal things. You are. And you need to remember that. Like you worked hard for it. Imposter syndrome is a real thing and
Hmm.
it can really uh get to you sometimes, but just remember all of the work you did to get into those programs and don't take it lightly. Be proud of yourself. Be kind with the way that you talk to yourself and those around you too.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. And I really hope that, excuse me, I really hope that when people are looking into their future and into graduate schools, that they're willing to talk about how smart and how accomplished and how great that they are. I think that people, especially women, are afraid to talk about their accomplishments. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, you should be proud of yourself. And it's really something too with academia, like it really is, and all the ladies will understand this. It's all about the way you say it. And if you're coming from the right mindset, then don't overthink stuff. Be proud of what you've worked for. And trust me, I'm not saying that's easy to not overthink stuff. Like we're
mm,
scholars, we do that for a living. But try your best, not to overthink how people may perceive you. Like if you have an idea, if you're willing, like be willing to go to bat for yourself and don't shy away from expressing what you're really thinking. and own that. And also too, and a side note, like don't be afraid to look stupid sometimes. Like real recognizes real. That's true for life. So and people will gravitate to you if you're authentic about it, if you you know you're not BSing them. People know that. And yeah, and it's like own what you have worked for and be proud
Mm.
of that. If you can turn a negative into a positive, you're going to go very far in life, no matter what the field, whether you're in academia or not. You're going to go far. You got to laugh at things sometimes and just it's I didn't know, you
And
know.
also, you have you have to be okay to eat your time sometimes when you're
Yeah.
doing research.
Yeah.
You spend hours researching something and then you realize that you were going down the wrong path.
It's yeah, sometimes and I have trouble with that one too. I'm definitely guilty of it, but then again, you never really quite know. Sometimes sometimes that all that work you did can be useful for another project, but
Right, right. Never throw your research away, but realize that you might be going down the wrong path for the
yeah.
question you have at that moment.
And when you do realize, like just readjust. Yeah, don't waste your own time if you figure out like, hey, this isn't what I should be doing right now. I think sometimes people get really like, I've invested so much in this and they
Mm-hmm.
just
That was what, yeah.
yeah, they keep going and sometimes it's a case by case thing. You know, sometimes maybe it'll lead you to something else. Others
Invest in a good external hard drive. Anybody going into school, invest in an external hard drive.
that is such good advice. Yeah. And yeah, in my department, they used to say all the time that if something is not backed up 3 times, it's not backed up at all. So always have like several copies of your research because
That's
you
how
want to be safe.
my senior thesis was lost to a computer that just bricked.
Oh, oh
After
no.
I graduated, I was hoping that eventually I would use that as like step one towards my master's, and the computer bricked. And my brother looked at me as, a 11th grader going, "Why didn't you back your computer up?" And I'm like,
Right? It's another one of those life lessons. It happens one time and then you never let it happen again. Because
yeah.
I've had that where I've lost like a paper that you're just in love with and that's not that doesn't happen often where I really like the paper I wrote. And one time I lost it, you know, and I was just like, I don't oh my God, I can't replicate this. It was devastating, but now I'm constantly saving stuff all the time.
Yeah, and don't always trust the cloud.
Yeah.
Don't always trust the
Yes.
cloud. My husband has learned that one. Don't always
Yeah.
trust the cloud.
Yeah, you gave excellent advice. A good external hard drive.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But so so for anybody who's looking to into grad schools in the next couple of years, make sure you study for the GRE, although you need to be able to advocate for yourself for whatever program you want. And remember, your undergraduate degree is your resume for your master's degree. Is there anything else you would like to add before we end things?
I will say more on the cosmetic side. Something
Oh.
this is a tad bit of a tangent, but it's like a little story, but I'm glad I listened. There was one time in grad school where I was doing a conservation slash archival project. I had to manage a team of volunteers, but on that team, there were a few old ladies and they told me like we were talking about eye creams for whatever reason and they stopped me and they were like, Sarah, it's not the eyes that go first, it's the neck. And we just like we're dying laughing, but now thinking about all of my academic career so far and good cosmetic tips, I would say especially if you get a doctorate, invest in a good eye cream and a good neck cream because you're not going to be getting a lot of sleep. So it's time to invest in those good skincare products if you get a doctorate.
Honestly, I wish I had more female professors because I think my entire undergraduate degree, I had two female professors
Yeah.
total. And they were And I'm sure this wouldn't surprise you. They were both women's history professors.
Mm.
And I think we need more women. We need more women who are, I would love to see a female Civil War historian at a university somewhere in the future, but I don't think I've I've never run into that.
Yeah, I would love to see more ladies, amongst us. And it's true, every level that you go up, the number of women who stay in these programs, it's not as many, and it's unfortunate. But I think there's where you just yeah, for the ladies that do stick in it, remember to pay things forward and encourage other women and build those relationships, like make those connections, because women unfortunately sometimes we can get very competitive and catty with each other. And I think if we can stop doing that, there's going to be a better culture within academia, and like encourage, reach out to those other women and share those little life tips that only you understand. And I think more women, because that's how you figure out like that work professional and personal balance, right? You got to learn from the other women around you. How did they do that? How did they balance all of their teaching load, their research with building, having a family? How did they do that? So if more women would share just the little life advice, things like that, I think we would see more ladies figure out creative ways to find that balance.
Yeah. And I would, because our voices are needed. All of our voices are
Yes.
needed. I would put myself on the liberal spectrum, but I would love to see more conservative females in academia as well, because we are all voices are necessary for us to have a full story. One of the first things one of my history professors taught me was that history is really about who wrote the book, and
Mm.
we need more women writing the book.
Yeah, I agree with you so much. I'm such a big advocate of diversity of thought. And you've mentioned you have an anthropology background. So I what is that? It's a small statue. It's like the Venus of Willendorf or something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's very small, but it's very well known. And I hope I didn't get the name wrong. But I remember reading an article one time where, for a long time, like the rhetoric was that it was believed it was something about it represented fertility, and things like that. And then I think it was in like maybe the late 80s, 90s, maybe 90s. I'm gonna have to fair I'll try to find that one and send that one to you too. But it was hilarious, and it was so simple, but just showed the power of having women there, because that statue, it took one female anthropologist to just look at it from a completely different angle. And because everyone had just been looking at it like directly, she looked at it from the top down and said, hey, that's kind of what my body looked like when I was pregnant. What if this was created by a woman who was just kind of bored while she was pregnant, and then it turned into like this whole big thing, but it was just her voice challenged all. It was just a different idea, just because she had been pregnant and she looked at the whole scholarship from a different perspective. And I always love that example, because it just shows how important it is to have women's viewpoints and their experiences there, because it is different from men. We do have different experiences from men, but you do not have to be ashamed of that at all. Stay feminine, because your feminine viewpoint, your feminine presence is what's needed. Like, and it's very strong in its own way. Don't ever think that just because it's different that it's not as strong.
Yes. And also don't think that if you're liberal that you also can't be feminine as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't ever believe that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's so much pressure and weird things going on for ladies in academia, but yeah, I love that. Be proud to be feminine, be proud of that feminine energy. I want different viewpoints, and I completely understand the part where you said more conservative women, because I'm conservative. My values are very conservative, and and I think sometimes that throws people off, like, "Oh, we don't know what to do with her in academia." But,
I I
like,
disagree completely.
I think it's important because a lot of people hear those words and then they make these all of these crazy assumptions about you just by one word. It's like there's so much more to
Oh,
every
oh man.
person.
When I tell people I'm Catholic, it's like they assume that I'm conservative, but it's like I'm not conservative. I just
Yeah,
find my spirituality at a Catholic church.
yeah. It's yeah, I totally get that too because it's like my core values are very conservative, but I am still a woman in academia, so there are some topics where I am much more progressive. I think I just freak people out sometimes because I do this crazy thing called thinking for myself. And they're like,
That's just shocking. Yeah, yeah.
I know,
Isn't it?
right?
It's like I'm a Catholic woman who's married, and I took my husband's name, and they're like, "Oh, so you must be super conservative." I'm like,
No,
middle
not
finger to you.
necessarily. Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I think a lot of young students in college today make this assumption that women who have different religious beliefs, maybe different political beliefs, are not going to be able to find common ground.
Oh,
It's like, no, we have a lot of common ground.
oh, I've had this discussion many times. I think every single woman in the room could sit there and go, "Why don't we have paid maternity leave?"
Yes. Yeah.
Every woman in the room, every woman would be like, "Why don't we have paid maternity leave?" Oh yeah, it's because less than what 15% of Congress is female.
Mhm. Yeah, the ladies are needed. All backgrounds, all religious views, all political views, you are needed desperately in politics right now because, well, not just politics, really
Everywhere.
yeah, everywhere. But because I think sometimes women themselves forget that we set the tone for society based off of what we tolerate. When we can answer, "This is where I draw the line," or "This is what I will tolerate, this is what I will not tolerate," then it's like, "Uh-oh, society's shifting."
Well, that's why the Me Too movement scared the crap out of people.
I think yeah, there's it got a lot
It
of
got
attention.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I know that it's a polarizing issue, but at the end of the day, the fact that women were more willing to talk about their sexual assaults we're
yeah.
we're saying no, I don't want to be harassed and assaulted at work or at school or any place of that nature scared the crap out of people.
Because it is so authentic, and I think sometimes people have a very tough time dealing with that, or they don't know how to, really, like, how they don't know how to process someone who's being so honest about things, and I think for society, with the Me Too movement, we have to look at it um, from not just a political mindset or through a political lens. Like that whole movement, I think, really should be prompting just really honest discussions about how women are really feeling. And for historians, I think we need to realize that it's a turning point, and that a lot of discussions that need to happen, but for different things in the culture, we're shying away from them, and that's a problem because now we have women who are just scared to be a woman, and that breaks my heart because I'm gonna get candid here, like, I have experienced abuse too. So when I hear women who
Mm.
share those stories, yeah, it's like, it is not just about don't get lost in, like, political nonsense, like, this is a every woman understands that. Those moments where you didn't have agency over your own person, that's scary. And you to have the courage to talk about it, you have be brave and own that and realize that you're helping more people just by talking about it. Like there's and this is me being a teacher too, right? But if you look at like discussions about abortion in the 1930s, very similar to today. And some people just get very linear with how they want to approach it. But I would challenge people to think like, where's the common ground? And how do we heal as a society? How do we make everyone feel safe and protected. And for Americans, how do we make sure that everyone is not only has the rights of an American citizen, but is brave enough to follow through on the responsibilities of being a United States citizen. I it's terrifying, to talk about stuff, but I commend those who do. And yeah,
I
all
think
women can
I
connect
think we
with that.
do. Yeah, we need to talk. Everybody needs their voices heard, and we need to put ourselves in positions of power, education, and authority.
Yeah. Yeah. And we shouldn't you don't have to be ashamed, and it is possible. I've seen it happen where I think sometimes women think I have to choose a career or choose family. And I would say, what if we just kind of say maybe the paradigm needs to shift? What if I don't want to have to choose? And what if I can do different things at different times in my life? What if I can find that balance? What if, we're going through a growing pains as a global society, but also particularly in America. And I think some people at times get lost in the chaos. But for me, I look at that kind of tense time as this is an opportunity for change where we can actually follow through on that.
I Gary Vaynerchuk posted something on Instagram and it just was a reminder that we live in a society where we will live past 60, we will live past 70, we will live most of us will live into our 80s and 90s, and starting a new career at 40 isn't as 40 is not the end of your life anymore.
No. Mm-mm. No, it ain't over till it's over. If you're
And
still breathing, babe, you can totally change your life.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I just turned 38 yesterday, and yes, I have small boys here, but one's going to be in kindergarten this school year coming up, and the other one, a couple of years, will be in kindergarten. And I won't have to worry about paying for daycare. Maybe I'll be paying for grad school instead.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, and education is changing. The pandemic really did prompt a lot of change. So for women who maybe get discouraged and think like, "Oh, it's not something that can happen for me." It totally can. There I'm telling you from the teacher side too, education is in a complete transformative state right now. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes that will allow women to have more flexibility with how and agency over their educational career and their personal life too.
Yeah, I am looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to. So, where could what are you up to right now online in any sort of spaces like that? Where could we follow you?
I am trying to get better about sharing more about what's going on with my academic career because I feel very humbled and blessed that I am pursuing something that I love and have this amazing doctoral program where I can really work on these projects. But the main thing that is going on behind the scenes is I'm building a museum. That's a dream of mine. And I'm working hard to try to the pandemic challenged things and threw off my plan, but I'm working hard to get the Museum of of Cosmetic History off the ground. So that's something that I'm working with the other board of direct or the entire board of directors. We're working to get that to the next phase of development. I think we're going to probably stay in Orange County, California. I'm not a huge fan of LA for different reasons. So it's probably going to be Orange County, but that's the big thing. And I'm working hard on trying to bring cosmetic history as a discipline to life. And that was part of why I chose Claremont because they've known about that project from the very beginning and were so supportive of it. So it's not just the museum, it's not just my own podcast, The Makeup Historian. It's also trying to create an academic discipline that is respected. But part of that is I have to be the one to do the hard work of bringing attention to that and showing people that this is something that is can be a source of good academic research because a lot of our history has not, and it's not just for women, but obviously women's voices are a huge part of this entire endeavor. We communicate differently and throughout world history. Our voices have not always been preserved in, sometimes not at all, but sometimes not in typical ways. And all of cosmetics, like, it is such an opportunity to really give agency back to women's history, or to change perceptions on how we go about historical discourse and research. So that's probably the main thing that I'm up to, is trying to build a museum. And then I'm also trying to develop my own tech skills, get better at podcast producing. I'm learning as I go. So each
Me
journey,
too. Me too.
right? Yeah, each season is kind of its own little journey, and I'm working with the resources that I have, but the podcast really was to be able to, not only share the viewpoints and stories that I thought were at risk of being censored, but it was also to give myself more control over my publications, and to say, like, this is, as Sarah, this is what I think is important and deserves more historical research. And academia can be challenging, and there is censorship going on, and women understand that very well. Sometimes women get censored, and that was my way of trying to fix that problem. So the podcast, the museum, and trying to get stronger as a young woman. I made a promise to myself that when I started my doctorate, I would try very hard to get healthier in mind, body, spirit, and to do the hard work of healing from past things in life, like abuse. And I wish people would be honest that healing is, it's a journey, but I'm proud of myself that I'm taking that on while all of this other stuff is going on too. So I rambled there a little bit, but a lot's going on.
I can only, yeah. So thank you so much, almost Dr. Sara Long.
I like that. Almost. We're almost there.
We're almost there.
Yeah.
We I will be leaving show notes in the show notes about everything that's going on with you, including links to everything the makeup historian is up to at the moment. And
Thank you.
and I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon. If any of you listeners have any questions, please leave them in the comments on social media. And I probably can't answer them, so I'll make sure to deliver them to Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's amazing experience. Once again, I
Thank
feel
you.
honored.
Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Bye.
Mhm. Bye.